every day. Families lose opportunities they never realized they had. Schools lose potential they never discovered. Communities lose future leaders they never expected to lose. Not because young people lack ability, not because they lack dreams, but because emotional struggles were left unnoticed until they quietly changed the direction of a life. The greatest cost of overlooked emotional struggles is rarely seen immediately. It appears later, in broken confidence, in damaged relationships, in missed opportunities, dreams quietly abandoned, and futures that could have been very different. By the time many adults finally recognize what happened, the emotional struggle has been shaping that young person's life for months, sometimes even years. Today's conversation is not about blame, it is about awareness, because most parents genuinely love their children. Most teachers genuinely want their students to succeed. Most caregivers, mentors, and counselors genuinely want the very best for the young people entrusted to them. Yet, genuine care alone is not always enough. Sometimes, we simply fail to recognize emotional struggles until their consequences become impossible to ignore. That is why today's conversation matters, not only for teachers, but for every parent, every teacher, every counselor, every caregiver, every mentor, every school, and every community that hopes to raise emotionally healthy young people. Because recognizing emotional struggles early may not change yesterday, but it can completely change tomorrow. Welcome, dear friends. Welcome once again to Nurture and Thrive Therapy. I am truly delighted to have you here. This is a place where we share practical, research-informed counseling conversations that strengthen individuals, families, schools, workplaces, and communities. Whether you're joining us for the first time or you've been faithfully followed this playlist, thank you for choosing to learn with us today. This episode continues our journey through understanding the hidden world of teenagers, but from a completely different perspective. In our previous episode, we explored some of the hidden emotional burdens many teenagers quietly carry. Today, we are taking the conversation one step further. We are asking, what can happen when adults fail to recognize teenagers' emotional struggles? The answer may surprise you. Some of the consequences are visible, many are not. Some appear during adolescence, others quietly shape adulthood. So, I invite you to stay with me until the very end, because today's discussion may completely change how you understand the young people around you. Let's begin. One of the greatest misconceptions many adults believe is that the consequences of emotional struggles always appear immediately. In reality, they rarely do. Most emotional struggles do not suddenly change a teenager's future overnight. Instead, they quietly influence the small decisions a young person makes every single day. Over time, those small decisions begin shaping confidence, relationships, academic choices, career aspirations, and even how they see themselves. This is why the greatest danger is often not the emotional struggle itself. The greatest danger is allowing that struggle to continue unnoticed for so long that it quietly becomes part of the teenager's identity. Many young people do not wake up one morning believing they are not good enough. Those beliefs often develop gradually. Sometimes, after repeatedly feeling unheard, sometimes after carrying worries alone, sometimes after believing they must always appear strong, sometimes after convincing themselves that asking for help will only create more problems. As these experiences continue without support, they begin to influence the way teenagers interpret the world around them. Instead of seeing opportunities, they begin noticing limitations. Instead of believing they can succeed, they begin questioning whether they are capable. Instead of expecting understanding, they begin expecting disappointment. This is one of the hidden costs adults rarely see. Because nothing dramatic may be happening on the outside, the teenagers still attend school. They still greet respectfully. They still complete responsibilities. They still smile when necessary. Yet, internally, their confidence may already be changing. And confidence is one of the foundations upon which healthy adulthood is built. Research in adolescent development consistently shows that adolescence is a period during which young people develop their sense of identity, sense of competence, sense of belonging and direction. Experiences during these years can have lasting effects on how they view themselves and relate to others later in life. That is why emotional support during adolescence is not simply about helping teenagers feel better today. It is about protecting the adults they are becoming tomorrow. As parents, teachers, caregivers, mentors, and counselors, one of the greatest gifts we can give young people is not perfection. It is helping them develop a realistic belief that they matter, that their feelings are important, that asking for support is safe, and that difficult moments do not define their future. When those messages are consistently reinforced, emotional struggles become easier to manage before they quietly reshape identity. And perhaps this leads us to one of the most overlooked realities of all. Sometimes the emotional struggle that changes a teenager's future is not the one adults ignore intentionally. It is the one they never recognized in the first place. Dear friends, if unnoticed emotional struggles can gradually change the way teenagers see themselves, what happens next? Why do these hidden struggles begin affecting families? Why do they begin affecting friendships, schools, and the relationships teenagers build with the people who love them most? That is exactly where we're going next. One of the greatest misconceptions about emotional struggle is believing that they affect only the teenager. In reality, they rarely stay with one person, like a small crack in the foundation of a house. Unnoticed emotional struggle often spread quietly into other relationships. The first place this usually happens is within the family, not because families stop loving one another, but because emotional distance can grow even when physical closeness remains. Many families still eat together. They still greet each other every morning. They still attend important events together. From the outside, everything appears normal. Yet, meaningful conversations gradually become fewer. Simple answers replace honest conversations. Simple answers such as, "Fine, I'm okay, nothing is not important." These words become routine, and over time, family members begin talking to one another without truly talking with one another. That emotional distance rarely happens overnight. It develops slowly when young people repeatedly conclude that no one will really understand what they're trying to say. It develops slowly when young people repeatedly conclude that no one really understands what they are trying to say. Sometimes, adults misunderstand this silence. They assume the teenager has become rude, too independent, too secretive, too stubborn. But sometimes, the silence is simply the language of an emotional struggle that has never found a safe place to be heard. This creates another hidden consequence. Families gradually stop recognizing changes that would once have been obvious. A teenager laughs less. No one notices. A teenager becomes usually quiet. Everyone assumes it is a phase. A teenager withdraws from activities they once enjoyed. People become busy with their own activities. Life continues. The emotional struggle continues too. All because the family lacks love, but because daily responsibilities can sometimes become louder than emotional conversations. This is why emotional safety within families should never be left to chance. Healthy families are not families without problems. Healthy families are families where people know they can speak honestly without fear of shame, without fear of ridicule, or fear of immediate judgment. Sometimes, the most important conversation in a home is not about school results, for instance. It's not even about household responsibilities, not about future plans, but sometimes the most important question should be or is simply, how have you really been coping? Or how have you really been coping lately? And then, having the patience to listen without rushing to correct, without interrupting, without turning the conversation into a lecture. Because when young people experience that kind of emotional safety consistently, families do more than solve problems. They build trust. And trust often becomes the bridge that allows support to reach a struggling teenager before emotional pain becomes emotional isolation. Perhaps this is why some of the strongest families are not those who avoid difficult conversations. They are the families who learn how to have them with compassion, patience, and understanding. But emotional struggles do not affect only families. Teenagers spend a significant part of their lives in school. So, what happens when these same hidden struggles quietly follow them into classrooms? Friendships, leadership opportunities, and dreams for the future. That is where our next conversation takes us. Perhaps one of the saddest realities about unnoticed emotional struggles is this. They begin influencing a teenager's future long before anyone realizes it. Most people imagine that future success depends mainly on intelligence, good schools, hard work, or opportunities. All of those matter, but there is another influence that often receives far less attention. A teenager's emotional well-being quietly shapes many of the decisions that determine the direction of life. Think about it. Confidence influences whether a young person applies for leadership positions. Self-worth influences whether they believe they deserve opportunities. Fear influences whether they speak up in class. Emotional exhaustion influences how well they concentrate. Unresolved emotional pain can influence friendships, career choices, relationships, and even the courage to pursue lifelong dreams. This is why emotional well-being should never be viewed as something separate from academic success or personal development. They are deeply connected. Many gifted teenagers gradually stop participating, not because they suddenly become less intelligent, but because something inside them has convinced them that remaining unnoticed feels safer than risking disappointment. Others begin avoiding responsibilities they once enjoyed. Some no longer volunteer for leadership opportunities. Others slowly withdraw from activities that once brought them joy. Without careful attention, adults may conclude that these young people have become lazy, unmotivated, or simply uninterested. Yet, beneath those behaviors may be an emotional struggle that has quietly changed how they see their own potential. Research in developmental psychology reminds us that adolescence is a period of remarkable brain development. During these years, young people are learning not only academic subjects, they are also developing resilience, decision-making skills, problem-solving abilities, emotional regulation, healthy relationships, and a sense of identity. When emotional struggles remain unsupported during this important stage of development, the effects may continue into adulthood unless caring intervention takes place. The encouraging news is this: these outcomes are not inevitable. Teenagers are remarkably capable of growth and recovery when they receive understanding, appropriate guidance, and consistent emotional support. That is why recognizing emotional struggles early is not simply about preventing problems, it is about protecting possibilities. Every teenager deserves the opportunity to discover who they can become without emotional burden silently limiting their future. The greatest gifts we can give a young person as adults sometimes is not solving every problem. It is helping them believe that difficult experiences do not define the rest of their life. And when that belief takes roots, hope begins replacing fear. Confidence slowly returns, and possibilities begin opening once again. Perhaps this is why early emotional support is one of the greatest investments any family, school, or community can make. Because when we protect the emotional well-being of young people today, we are also protecting the future of tomorrow's parents, teachers, leaders, professionals, and communities. Dear all, we just explored what unnoticed emotional struggles can do to a teenager's identity, their family relationships, and even their future opportunities. But one important question remains, and the question is this: what can adults do differently? How can parents, teachers, counselors, mentors, caregivers, and communities recognize emotional struggles earlier and respond in ways that genuinely help rather than unintentionally pushing young people further into silence? How can parents, teachers, counselors, mentors, caregivers, and communities recognize emotional struggles earlier and respond in ways that genuinely help rather than unintentionally pushing young people further into silence? Let's end today's conversation with practical guidance that every caring adult can begin applying immediately. By now, one message has become very clear. The message is: unnoticed emotional struggles rarely remain unnoticed forever. Eventually, They begin showing themselves through behavior, through relationships, through choices, or opportunities that quietly disappear. The encouraging news is that emotional struggle do not have to teach or to reach that point before adults respond. Every caring adult has the ability to make a meaningful difference, not by having all the answers, but by becoming emotionally available. So, let me leave you with 5 practical commitments that can help every young person feel more seen, more heard, and more supported. Commitment 1. Notice the small changes before they begin or they become big problems. Teenagers often communicate through changes before they communicate through words. And a once confident teenager can become unusually quiet. A young person who loved participating begins withdrawing. Someone who usually enjoys family conversations suddenly keeps everything brief, rather than immediately asking as adults, "What's wrong with you?" Try asking, I've noticed you seem different lately. How have you really been doing?" Sometimes that simple observation opens a conversation that has been waiting to open or to happen. Let's move over to commitment 2. Create safety before expecting honesty. Many adults want teenagers to speak honestly, but honesty grows best in emotionally safe environments. Young people are far more likely to open up when they know they will be listened to before they are corrected. Sometimes the greatest gift we can give is not immediate advice, it is patient attention. Because when teenagers feel respected, they are more willing to trust, and trust makes difficult conversations possible. We have commitment 3. Separate behavior from the person. I want you to know that every behavior has a story. That does not mean every behavior is acceptable or should be acceptable or should be accepted. But it does mean that every behavior deserves understanding before judgment. As adults, instead of asking questions like, "Why are you behaving like this?" consider asking, "What might this behavior be trying to communicate?" You see, that single sheet can completely change how adults respond. Commitment 4. Build consistent emotional connections. Emotional safety is not created during one serious conversation. It is built through many ordinary moments, such as the conversations on the way to school, the check-in after a long day, the moments when teenagers feel free to laugh, ask questions, express disappointment, or even disagree respectfully without fear of humiliation. These ordinary moments become the foundation that makes extraordinary conversations possible when life becomes difficult. Commitment 5. Remember that hope can be restored. Perhaps the most important message I want every parent, teacher, counselor, mentor, caregiver, and young person to hear today is this: no emotional struggle has to define a teenager's future. With understanding, timely support, healthy relationships, and appropriate professional guidance when needed, young people have an incredible capacity to recover, grow, and thrive. That is why we should never give up on teenagers simply because they are struggling today. Sometimes the young person who appears most discouraged today becomes the adult who inspires others tomorrow. Hope grows where understanding is present. Healing begins where people feel seen. And transformation often starts with one caring adult who chooses to notice what others have overlooked. That caring adult could be a parent, a teacher, a counselor, a mentor, a caregiver, or perhaps it could be you. As we conclude today's conversations, I want you to leave with one final thought. When adults recognize emotional struggles early, we are not only preventing pain, we are protecting potential. Every teenager deserves the opportunity to grow in an environment where they feel valued, understood, and supported. When we create that kind of environment, we don't simply help young people overcome today's challenges. We help them build tomorrow's possibilities. Thank you for spending this time with me. If today's conversation has encouraged you, I invite you to share it with a parent, teacher, counselor, mentor, caregiver, or anyone committed to helping young people flourish. Together, we can build families, schools, and communities where teenagers never have to carry their emotional struggles alone. I am Mary Ann Ojotule Charles, student counselor at the National Open University of Nigeria. I am a professional counselor, wellness professional, researcher, and human development educator. Through Nurture and Try Therapy, I share practical, research-informed counseling conversations that support emotional well-being and human development across every stage of life, from childhood and adolescence to education, relationships, career growth, recovery, faith, and lifelong personal development. Thank you for watching. Until next time, keep nurturing, keep thriving, and never underestimate the difference one caring conversation can make. Thanks once again, and see you again in our next episode. Bye for now.